According to World Health Organization, malnutrition and hunger are considered to be rampant among displaced populations and refugees. Currently, around 40 million people across the globe comprising of infants, children, adolescents, adults and older people suffer from one or multiple forms of malnutrition. To help address these challenges, nutritionists and dietetics are needed in roll out of food aid programs among other humanitarian interventions. Thus, undertaking a certificate in human nutrition and dietetics at Humanitarian Global gives you in-depth knowledge and understanding of Introduction to Nutrition. In this module, you get introduced to nutrition as a topic, learn the principles of nutrition, nutrition assessment and primary healthcare. Secondly, nutrition in the lifespan. You get to explore topics about the human anatomy and physiology, nutrition in convalescence, nutrition for pregnant and lactating mothers and nutrition in the elderly. And thirdly, meal planning. Get an introduction to meal planning, food safety, hygiene, non-communicable diseases and how to diagnose nutrition in a community. Apply for this course today by visiting our website www.humanitarianglobal.com for more details.
I'd like to welcome you to I'd like to welcome you for this nutrition webinar session, and with me I have two people, and the first person being Anthony, who would like to unmute his microphone and give us a small introduction. Anthony, are you there with us?
Thank you to all of our participants for connecting for this important meeting that we are going to be focusing on introduction to human nutrition. And this is a great day. And before we do that, I'd just like to give you an overview of who we are as Humanitarian Global, what we do, and any other information in regard to the institution. So Humanitarian Global, this is an institute that is based in Nairobi, Kenya. Our main focus has been to work with both humanitarian and development professionals like you when it comes to capacity building. So that is what we focus on, and we're based in Nairobi, Kenya, as I said, and we do cover quite a wide range of areas when it comes to training. And some of these areas, they include water sanitation and hygiene, monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning, human nutrition and dietetics, maternal, infant and young child nutrition. We also do cover procurement and supply chain management. We also do cover food security and nutrition in emergencies, and also disaster risk reduction and management. So with that said, and I know most of us, we have interacted before, let's just try to maintain the rules that we always say to you whenever we have these kind of sessions. We already have your details, so on the chat section, let's maintain it for your feedback and comments. And then if you have any question, ensure that you can place the same on the Q&A section. So that's where you can post your questions so that we can address them as the session progresses. And also in that regard, if you want to get in touch with us in terms of further training and also certification in some of these areas that you train on, always feel free to contact our team here. And the panelists that you can see on the chat section, and they are going to assist you. So with that said, I would like to wish you the very best as we get started with this session today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Anthony. And our next person is our guest speaker for the day. Annette, are you there with us?
Good morning, everybody.
Morning. You can start by giving a small introduction about yourself, then we can begin the session.
Thank you, Eric and Anthony. My name is Annette Mambo. I'm a nutritionist. And thank you to all the participants who have attended our various sessions and the new participants. And I welcome you to today's session. Hope that it will be an interactive session.
Thank you, Annette. I think we can begin with the session.
Thank you, Eric. So today's session, nutrition, is an introductory session to nutrition, and we will be dealing with introduction to human nutrition. The topic is nutrients, and today we will start on macronutrients. So I hope that this session is going to be useful to everybody who wants to practice nutrition or who is already practicing the nutrition, or any other related health sciences. So we will begin. So in today's session, we expect to learn the meaning of the relevant terms, to be able to classify nutrients and carbohydrates, to explain the digestion, absorption, metabolism, and excretion of carbohydrates, explain the role of dietary fiber, state the food sources and functions of carbohydrates, explain the consequences of deficiency and excess of carbohydrates in the body. So we will begin with the relevant terms. There are many, but for today we'll just cover a few that we may mention in the session. So what is nutrition? Nutrition is a science, and this science covers what happens to food and the nutrients in food and any other substance that may be found there in food from the moment it is ingested to the moment is the excretion of substances. All what happens in between the ingestion and excretion is what is nutrition. So there is a definition there that you can refer to, but that's the explanation. Food are any substances, whether they are fluid or they are solid or a mixture of them, that are ingested. And when ingested, the body uses the food to provide nutrients to the body of an organism so that it can grow and perform all the other vital processes. A meal is a combination of foods that are consumed at specific times. An example is breakfast, lunch, dinner. So those meals that are consumed at specific times are the ones that we call meals. A diet, it is any kind and amount of food that is consumed as a habit. Broadly, we have two types of diets. We have normal diets and we have therapeutic diets. So the normal diet, a good example is a balanced diet, which any health person can consume so that it can provide the nutrients that they need to function normally. Therapeutic diets are for therapeutic purposes, diets for the sick, for specific functions to improve health. Example of therapeutic diets are diets for people with diabetes, weight management diets, or any condition. So basically that is what is diet. And then nutrients, these are the components or the compounds that we get from food. So we consume food, and from food we get nutrients. And these nutrients are needed so that the body of a living organism can get energy, grow, it can repair its worn-out tissues, develop and produce, among other functions. Balanced diet is a diet that consists of a variety of foods, and these foods provide all the nutrients that are required in the body in adequate amounts for good health. Optimal nutrition is also related to a balanced diet. When you consume a balanced diet, meaning that it has a variety of foods, these different types of foods will give you all the nutrients in the right or in an adequate amount. And optimal nutrition should be on a proper schedule so as to achieve the best performance and the longest healthy life. Proper schedule means that you should consume foods to give you nutrients at proper times. Anti-nutrients, these are natural or synthetic compounds that are found in foods and that interfere with the absorption and digestion. Actually, they interfere with the digestion and absorption of nutrients. For example, the compounds may bind with some nutrients in the digestive system and prevent these nutrients from being absorbed. So despite the fact that you have consumed a food that gives you some of these nutrients, they are not able to be absorbed because of the presence of antinutrients, which may bind to these nutrients and form complex molecules that are not absorbable. So antinutrients are not good things. They work against nutrients. So in today's session, we will cover the most important nutrients that are required by the human body. And these nutrients are carbohydrates and dietary fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. Well, normally we say there are 6, but we have added water there. Water is not a nutrient per se, but it's very important to the health of individuals because water is involved in the majority of biochemical reactions and the processes that occur in the body. So water is important, it must be taken despite the fact that it does not have any nutrient value. So the reason why we are studying these nutrients is because they form the basis for anybody who is practicing as a nutritionist or dietitian and other health and related medical professionals. You will find that the knowledge of nutrients will help us when it comes to dealing with almost everything that is practiced in nutrition and dietetics. So now we go to the classification of nutrients. And nutrients can be classified in many ways. So for this session, I've identified 5 ways in which we can classify the nutrients. Number 1 is according to their chemical composition and nature. So what we mean here is the chemical structures of the nutrients, the elements that make them up. For example, here we will hear that we have some nutrients that are classified as organic or non-organic. And chemically here we say nutrient that has the carbon element present, that is an organic, and the one that does not have the carbon element, that is inorganic. We will know this later when we are dealing with more of the nutrients later in the session or later in the coming sessions. They're also classified according to their functions, and that is in brackets nutritive value. So we'll hear some nutrients are energy giving, others they help build the body, that is in form of repairing body tissue, and others are protective, that is they regulate body processes, they prevent or they protect the body from diseases and other similar dangers. Then there's also nutrients that are classified according to essentiality. Nutrients can be vital or non-vital. What we mean by essentiality is that some nutrients cannot be produced. They cannot be synthesized in the body, and therefore we must take them in through the diet. While other nutrients, even if we do not acquire them in the diet, we do not consume them in the foods, the body has a way of using other components of those diets or the nutrients to make or to synthesize those nutrients that have not been ingested. So essential nutrients must be consumed because they cannot be synthesized in the body, while non-essential nutrients do not necessarily need to be consumed in the diet because the body can synthesize them. Another way is the mass. Now, nutrients can also be classified according to the quantities required for the cells and organisms. We will hear that some nutrients are macronutrients and others are micronutrients. Macronutrients are those nutrients that are required by the body in relatively large amounts, and the micronutrients are required in relatively small amounts. We'll see these definitions later. And the other way of classification is according to their medicinal value. So other than giving us nutrition, that is nutritive value, some nutrients also have additional health benefits. They act, for example, as antioxidants by trying to fight the effects of radioactive species that are found in our bodies. Others act as anti-inflammatory. Examples of antioxidants are some vitamins. Example of anti-inflammatory are some fats, which we will look at later. So other than the nutrients, they may also help us to have better health. So that is a number of ways that we can classify nutrients. And in today's session, we have a general classification of the nutrients, where we are saying that nutrients can be classified generally into two broad categories, as we can see here, macronutrients and the micronutrients. The macronutrients can further be classified as carbohydrates, fats or lipids, and proteins. And the micronutrients can be classified as vitamins and minerals. And then vitamins can further be classified as water soluble or fat soluble, and minerals will be further classified as major minerals or macroelements or trace minerals. So today we are going to start with macronutrients, because for a deeper understanding of the nutrients, we have to start somewhere. We cannot cover all the nutrients in one session if we have to know more about them. So we will start with the macronutrients. And the macronutrients are, as I have mentioned there before, these are the nutrients required by the body in relatively large amounts. They are the carbohydrates, the fats, or lipids, and the proteins. All the macronutrients are very important because they provide the body with energy, in addition to the other specific functions, but all of them provide the body with energy. Now, there is just a comment here that is a general information that when we are considering the amount of energy, now that we know macronutrients produce energy, a person should get roughly 45 to 65% of their daily energy from carbohydrates, 10 to that 5% from their protein, and 25 to that 5 from lipids. That's just a general guide. However, the combination of these macronutrients, the ones that we are saying are the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fat in a diet, depend on a person's desire to produce different results from their diet. A good example is eating more protein in a diet may help with building more muscle, while eating fewer carbohydrates has been shown to help with weight loss. So it's not fixed in that a person must get this amount of protein, carbohydrates, but you may play around with these nutrients according to the needs of the body. If they are not essential, the body will always provide them from other nutrients that have been produced, have been ingested in the body. But for carbohydrates here, as we will see later, they are not essential. So that even if you do not consume enough, the body will always produce them from other nutrients that have been consumed in the body. So you can always have a different consumption of carbohydrates from the other person. This is just a guide of how much carbohydrates should be in a meal. So we start with the first, macronutrients. Remember, we have said macronutrients are three: the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats. So the carbohydrates here, they are a class of macromolecules, big molecules that are composed of They have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen elements. This will not scare you. As we go on, when we are doing food science and biochemistry of nutrition, we will understand this more. Now, the building blocks, or what we call monomers of carbohydrates, are a single sugar unit. In other words, sugars or single sugar units are the basic components of all carbohydrates. When we consume carbohydrates, we can break them down to small components. Their basic components are the single sugars. The examples of carbohydrates that we get from our diets include sugar, starch, and fiber. And we already know now that carbohydrates give us energy. So we go to the classification of carbohydrates, and this is very important because if we understand this, we'll understand even the digestion and absorption and the metabolism of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are divided or generally categorized into 4. We have monosaccharides, disaccharides, oligosaccharides, and polysaccharides. We will see that we also can classify them between simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. And simple carbohydrates are made of 1 or 2 single sugars, while complex carbohydrates are made of multiple sugars. So what are monosaccharides? Monosaccharides means 1 sugar unit. The prefix mono means 1, and the word saccharide means sugar. So the common dietary monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, and galactose. There are many more, but these are the common dietary ones. Disaccharides are carbohydrates that are made of 2 sugar units, and they include lactose, sucrose, maltose. Now, because we are saying they are made of 2 monosaccharides or 2 sugar units, lactose in disaccharide there is made from glucose and galactose, which is connected together. Sucrose is made from glucose and fructose, and the maltose is made from 2 glucose units. Now, lactose can be found in the milk sugar, and fructose, sucrose is an example of the table sugar that we use, and the maltose can be found from malt. Then we have oligosaccharides, which are carbohydrates that are made up of 3 to 9 simple sugars, that is monosaccharide units, and most oligosaccharides are found in plants. I'll give 3 examples here. One example, and there are many, but give just for our understanding. Examples include raffinose. This is a trisaccharide, so you can see from the prefix there. Tri means 3, saccharide is sugar. It is made of 3 monosaccharide units, which are galactose, glucose, and fructose, and is commonly found in beans, cabbage, broccoli. We also have another type of example of oligosaccharide. We have starchose, which is a tetrasaccharide, meaning it is made up of 4 saccharide units, and it is composed of sucrose and raffinose. Remember, we said raffinose has all the, if I just go back here, raffinose has all of those monosaccharides. We said raffinose has galactose, glucose, and fructose. And now we are saying starchose has all that plus sucrose, and is commonly found in many vegetables such as green beans, soybeans, and other beans. Another example of oligosaccharide that has been discovered the human milk oligosaccharides. There are many types, and this group of oligosaccharides are made up of a combination of 5 basic monosaccharides. So it can be any monosaccharides there, but they have to be around 5. So those are examples. Now, the other class of carbohydrate is polysaccharide, which are made of 10 or more monosaccharide molecules or units. And the 3 most important biological polysaccharides are starch. We'll see, or we can understand that starch is made up by a mixture of the polymers of glucose, which are called amylopectin and amylose. Okay, this one should not really scare you, but we should just know that polysaccharides, such as starch, are made up of many monosaccharides units. Another example is cellulose, and another one is glycogen. Now, starch is an energy storage molecule in plants. Cellulose is an energy, is used for the structure and support of plant cell walls, and glycogen is used for energy storage in animals. So those are the examples of polysaccharides that we can mention today: starch, cellulose, and glycogen. So this is what we have been saying: classification of carbohydrates. They are classified into 2, simple or complex. And then the simple carbohydrates can be monosaccharides or disaccharides. Remember, monosaccharides are single sugar, only one sugar unit. Disaccharides are made out of 2 monosaccharides. And then we have complex, where we have oligosaccharides and polysaccharides. These are made, oligosaccharides are made by 3 to 9 monosaccharide units. And the polysaccharides, as the word says, poly means many. They are made from 10 and more monosaccharide units or single sugar units. So examples of monosaccharides, we have said we have glucose, fructose, and galactose, and there are many more. These are just the dietary ones. Disaccharides, examples include sucrose, lactose, and maltose, and they are made of the 2. We say the sucrose is made of glucose and fructose. Lactose is made of glucose and galactose, and maltose is made up of glucose and glucose. And then we have oligosaccharides. Examples are raffinose, stachyose, and human milk oligosaccharides. We can always refer back what they are made out. And then starches, fibers, and glycogen are examples of polysaccharides. So when it comes to the digestion and the absorption and metabolism of carbohydrates, we first need to understand what are these processes. So metabolism is a set of chemical processes that happen within the cells in the body to convert food and other nutrients into fuel for the bodies to use. So all the chemical processes that occur in the cells, so that food can be converted into fuel. That is what is metabolism. The digestive system, or the gastrointestinal tract, which we call the GIT, play a major role in metabolism because it's very important for 2 functions: the digestion and absorption of food. Digestion means breaking down food into nutrients in the GIT, and absorption is a process of transporting nutrients from the digestive system into the blood so that they can be used in the body. So having understood that, we look at the GIT system because it will be relevant when we want to know how the carbohydrate foods that we eat are digested and absorbed. So this picture here shows the digestive system starting from the mouth all the way to the anus. So there, just to take you through, in the mouth we have the teeth and the tongue. We also have the salivary glands and the pharynx. Now the pharynx is the throat. The epiglottis is a small structure that is found at the end of the mouth that closes the air pathway. As you swallow, it closes the air pathway so that food goes down to the esophagus and not to the lungs. Esophagus is this tube here that carries food from the mouth to the stomach. And then from the stomach, food will go to the small intestines. And from the small intestine, it will go to the large intestines, which we are calling also the colon. And from there, the wastes will go to through the rectum into and through the anus where the wastes will be excreted. Now there are accessory organs that work together with the digestive system. We can see there is a liver, which produces pancreatic, which produces the bile that is used to digest fats. When we do the fats, we'll see how. And this liver, when it produces the bile is stored in the gallbladder and released through some ducts into the intestines for the digestion of fats, which we will see. The pancreas is just behind the stomach here, the one that I'm pointing. It is very, very important in digestion because it produces enzymes and pancreatic fluid that is very important in digestion of. So that is the digestive system, which we'll always learn in details when we do a unit in human anatomy and physiology. But for the sake of this session, we just have an overview of the digestive system. So how are the carbohydrates digested? So the first thing we must know is that carbohydrates are rarely consumed in a form that the body can easily use. So when you consume carbohydrate food, such as yam, cassava, bread, or whatever the food is, it cannot be used readily for the body as an energy source or for other functions. It must be broken down. And that is why we said foods must be broken down into nutrients in the digestive system so that they can be used by the body. The nutrients can be used by the body. So all the carbohydrates, whether they are disaccharides, whether they are oligosaccharides, whether they are polysaccharides, they must be broken down into the simplest sugars, that is, into glucose for the body to use for energy. We'll see how that happens. And the important thing we also should understand is that carbohydrates are water soluble. And this is very important because water is crucial in the breakdown of carbohydrates. For the body to break down the carbohydrates, water must be added back into the polymer. Polymer is a long chains of the monosaccharides units that form a starch and other complex carbohydrates. So you add water back into the carbohydrates to break it into its component monomers, that is, component single sugars. So that's important. This is possible because carbohydrates are water soluble. So the process of digestion is therefore called hydrolysis. And in hydrolysis, these long sugar chains, the ones we are calling polymers, are broken down into the individual sugars, that is monomers, that make them up. And we can note that it is harder for the body to break down the complex carbohydrates than the simpler carbohydrates. The reason being that the more complex carbohydrates have many sugars that need to be clipped out or that need to be broken down than the simple carbohydrates. And that is very relevant because when it comes to how fast a food can be digested, it is because of its class. Is it complex or is it simple? Now, before we talk about the carbohydrate digestion, we need to mention that there are two types of digestion that occurs to foods. We have one, mechanical digestion. This mechanical digestion occurs as a person chews and physically breaks down the food. So the other word for mechanical digestion is physical digestion. And this is physically breaking down the food. And a good example is through chewing, which we call also mastication. And in this process in the mouth, saliva is very important because it moistens the food. We also have number two, chemical digestion. It's another type of digestion that is enzyme mediated breakdown of large molecules into small molecules, and they are monomer in the GIT system. Now, chemical digestion involves enzymes to break down the large food molecules into their chemical building blocks. There are many types of enzymes, but we define digestive enzymes as proteins that break down large molecules like fat, proteins, and carbohydrates into smaller molecules that can then be absorbed through the intestinal wall and into the general circulation to, perform their functions as nutrients. These digestive systems are produced by many organs. For example, the stomach, the small intestines, the pancreas. We also have some being produced by the salivary gland in the mouth. So we will see that carbohydrates are digested using the two types of digestion, mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. So when you consume carbohydrate foods, where does the digestion begin? Both types of digestion, the mechanical and chemical digestion of carbohydrates, begin in the mouth as soon as the person starts eating. Mastication, remember that is chewing, crumbles the carbohydrate foods into smaller pieces. So you have done a mechanical digestion there by breaking foods into smaller pieces through mastication. Now, the salivary glands, which we saw in the picture of the digestive system, are in the oral cavity. They produce saliva that coats the food. And by doing so, this saliva moistens the food. And in addition to that, the saliva contains an enzyme that is called salivary amylase. It is called amylase, but because it comes with the saliva from the salivary gland, that is why we add the word salivary, because we are going to see there is another type of amylase that is produced by the pancreas. Now, this enzyme, don't forget that we said enzymes help to break down foods, break the bonds between the monomeric sugar units of disaccharide, oligosaccharide, and starches, which are polysaccharides. Note here, we are not mentioning that they break down monosaccharides, because monosaccharides already exist as single sugars. They can no longer be broken down. The body can use monosaccharides as they are. So the salivary amylase breaks down the starch into smaller chains of glucose, which are called dextrins and maltose. So the increased concentration of maltose, when you break down the starches, you break them to dextrins and then to maltose, in the mouth results from the mechanical and chemical breakdown of starches is what enhances the sweetness of starches. When you start chewing starches and you break them down into these simpler sugars, you start sensing their sweetness, because now they transform from being starch to sugars. And you can note that only about 5% of starches are broken down in the mouth by the amylase. Remember when I said that starch is the major polysaccharide that is important in the diet, and starch is made up of a mixture of polymers, which are called amylopectin and amylose. And now we are seeing we have an enzyme here called salivary amylase. You will note that whatever the enzyme breaks down, like now here we are saying the starch is broken down into shorter dextrins, and which are the shorter chains of glucose called dextrins and maltose. Whatever the enzyme amylase is broken down is the amylopectin and amylose. So we will see that later here in a summary that I've prepared. So once this food is now broken down chemically and also broken down mechanically in the mouth, the food travels through the esophagus to the stomach. And at this stage, the food is now referred to as chyme, and chyme is partially digested food mass. The esophagus also provides further mechanical digestion by carrying out peristalsis. So the way the food moves from the mouth to the stomach, or from one part of the digestive system to another, is through peristalsis. And peristalsis is contracting and relaxing of the GIT muscles, the gastrointestinal muscles of the esophagus, or other parts of the, as we will later on say, other parts of the digestive system. Now, the tightening of the esophagus breaks the food down into smaller pieces and helps to further mix the salivary amylases with the food. So that is what happens in the esophagus. There is mechanical digestion that goes on there because of the contracting and relaxing of the muscles. From the esophagus, the food, or the chyme that we already say partially digested food, it reaches the stomach. And in the stomach, there is no further chemical breakdown of carbohydrates. So the digestive system does not break down carbohydrates in the stomach. We'll see the reason. Now the stomach produces gastric juice. So the cells of the stomach produce a juice that we refer to gastric juice. And this juice is a mixture of digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid, and many other substances, mucus, electrolytes, and other substances, which are very important for absorbing nutrients. The stomach acid that is produced in the stomach, called hydrochloric acid, as you see there, helps to kill the bacteria in the chyme before it moves to the small intestines. So that acid in the stomach is very important. Any bacteria that may have been consumed with food is destroyed by the acid. Now, the optimal pH for the digestion of carbohydrates must be neutral to alkaline, meaning it has to have a pH of greater than 7. Carbohydrate digestions involve a neutral, alkaline, or to alkaline pH. Therefore, this enzyme, the salivary amylase that was produced by the salivary glands in the mouth, will stop working because of the acidic condition of the stomach. That is why we are saying that there is no further chemical breakdown of carbohydrates in the mouth, because the salivary amylase that came with the food from the mouth cannot function because of the low pH. I may mention that the stomach pH is anywhere between 1 and 3. That is very low, it's very acidic. And these digestive enzymes for carbohydrates will only occur in very neutral or alkaline pH. However, mechanical breakdown continues in the stomach because of the strong peristaltic contractions that occur in the stomach, and the stomach mixes the carbohydrates into the more uniform mixture of the chyme. So we continue breaking food through peristalsis and getting the carbohydrates further mechanically broken down in the stomach through mechanical breakdown. Now the chyme will then go to the small intestines, and it is here where the majority of carbohydrate digestion occurs. So the chyme gradually moves from the stomach into the upper part or the first part of the small intestines, which is called duodenum. When the food enters, or when the chyme, let's refer to it as the chyme, enters into the small intestines, the pancreas, which we said is an auxiliary organ that helps digestion, releases pancreatic juice through a duct. We have a duct that connects the pancreas to the small intestines called pancreatic duct. So once food is sensed, especially the acidic food is sensed into the small intestines, the pancreatic juice is produced by the pancreas, and it moves from the pancreas through the pancreatic duct into the small intestines, the first part of the small intestines. This pancreatic juice is alkaline because it has a bicarbonate component, and it contains the enzyme pancreatic amylase. Now, the reason why this pancreatic juice is alkaline, remember the chyme that is coming from the stomach is acidic because it has come from an acidic environment. The hydrochloric acid that was produced in the stomach is already mixed up with the chyme, and now this chyme comes into the small intestines. Remember, the enzymes that are involved in the breakdown of carbohydrates do not work in acidic environment. That is why the pancreas produces pancreatic juice that is alkaline. And in this juice, other than the fluid that is alkaline, it has an enzyme called pancreatic amylase. Now remember, in the mouth, the enzyme that was produced was called salivary amylase. And here now, the one that is produced by the pancreas and released into the small intestines is called pancreatic amylase. So the enzyme is the same, it's only the source where it is produced. So pancreatic amylase now continues to break down the carbohydrates of dextrins into shorter carbohydrate chains. I hope you are with me, because in the mouth, we said that the salivary amylase breaks down starch into dextrins, which are shorter molecules of starch, and into maltose, which are 2 glucose molecules. So this pancreatic amylase continues the breakdown, and it breaks now the shorter starch polymers or chains, which we are calling the dextrins, into even shorter carbohydrate chains. At the same time, enzymes that are collectively known as disaccharidases are secreted by the intestinal wall cells that line the villi. So these enzymes are sucrose. Just note the suffix. Instead of sucrose, we have sucrase, maltase, and lactase. And they break down remember these are disaccharides, they break down the disaccharides into monosaccharides. Now, for example, just to give an example, the enzyme sucrase, which comes from the word sucrose, and we have added the suffix "-s", making it an enzyme, will break down sucrose into its components, that is, into glucose and fructose molecule. Maltase will break down the maltose into 2 glucose units. And of course, the lactase will break down the lactose into glucose and galactose. So So in the small intestines, we have two sets of enzymes that are produced. We have the pancreatic amylase, and we have the ones that are produced by the intestinal cells to break down disaccharides. Just note that. It's still in the small intestines that we have other classes of enzymes called glucosidases that are produced in the brush border wall of the small, okay, they are still produced in the small intestines, and they assist together with the pancreatic amylase, they break down the dextrin, which we said they are shorter chains of starch, to maltose and further into glucose. When the enzyme lactase, now this is something that you need to note. We are talking about enzymes here, and sometimes the carbohydrate digestion may not go as expected. And we have heard that some people are lactose intolerant. So this is what happens to these people. When the enzyme lactase, which is produced by the intestinal cells in the small intestines, is not enough in some individuals, lactose, that is a milk sugar, is not sufficiently broken down, resulting into a condition called lactose intolerance. The undigested lactose moves to the large intestines, where the friendly bacteria that is found there is able to break it. The bacterial digestion of lactose produces some gases, and these gases lead to symptoms such as diarrhea, bloating, and abdominal cramps. So there's abdominal discomfort for the person who is lactose intolerant. And therefore, the person now cannot tolerate milk because it has lactose, which is a milk sugar. And this sugar, which is not broken down in the small intestines, when it moves to the large intestines, it's fermented there by the bacteria. And this fermentation leads to the production of some gases and acids, which cause problems for the person. That's what we are saying in other words. Now, we should also note, we said that carbohydrates, examples of carbohydrates are sugars. We also said there is starch, and we said fiber. We should note that fiber cannot be chemically digested. We cannot break down fiber by enzymes because the humans do not have enzymes that can break fiber. That is a class, an example of polysaccharide that exists in food. Unlike animals, animals like herbivores have enzymes that can break fibers, some fibers, while we humans don't have the capability because we do not have enzymes that can break down cellulose. Therefore, the fiber cannot be chemically digested, and it is absorbed by the digestive system, but instead it passes relatively intact. And when I say relatively intact, other than the mechanical breakdown, reduction in size because of being physically broken down, it passes relatively intact through the stomach, small intestine, and into the colon. And it is in the colon where some of it is broken down by the gut bacteria. We'll see later how. So we move on. The absorption and metabolism of carbohydrates. Now, once the carbohydrates are chemically broken down, if we have followed that process, we will get the single sugar units. And the single sugar units that we get are glucose, galactose, and fructose. Now, these single sugar units that now are there in the small intestines are absorbed through the walls of the small intestines. They are transported through the wall of the small intestines into the portal blood vein or blood vessel. Now, this is the blood vessel that drains blood from the small intestines and other surrounding organs. And this portal blood vein takes these nutrients or these elements straight to the liver from the intestines. When they get to the liver starts working on them. We are not going to the exact process. We will study that later in more advanced unit, but I would want to say that the liver does its work and converts galactose to glucose. Now the glucose may be utilized immediately as an energy source. The body cells start converting glucose into energy and using the energy. Or if the glucose is not used immediately, it may be stored to be used later, and it is stored in form of glycogen. We will see that it is stored in the muscle cells and in the liver cells. Or if it's excess, it will be converted into fats through a process called lipogenesis, which we will not really dwell on there. Now, when the glucose that gets to the liver and that is converted from galactose, when it's used to provide energy to the liver and released to the rest of the body cells to provide energy, the one that is stored as glycogen is stored through a process known as glycogenesis. And this glycogenesis process, when the glycogen is formed, it is formed mainly in the liver and muscle cells. And glucose is again combined through some biochemical processes. Glucose molecules are combined together to form polymers, very long chains of glucose molecules that can be broken down later when the body does not have enough glucose and stored in form of glycogen. So glycogen, as we see, is many molecules of glucose that have been combined and stored to be broken later when the body does not have enough energy. However, fructose, because remember we said now the monosaccharides that have been released from or that have been absorbed from the intestines, small intestines, into the blood and transported via the portal blood vein to the liver, we said we have glucose, galactose, and fructose. Those are the monosaccharides. And we are saying that glucose can be used into energy, or it can be stored as energy in form of glycogen. Now, what happens to fructose? Fructose is handled differently than glucose. And most of the fructose is metabolized in the liver. Fructose is not metabolized in other body cells because of its nature. So the liver does the metabolism in the liver. And the liver converts the fructose to glucose and uses it into energy. And if it is excess fructose, the liver will also convert it into fat and store it in the fat, as fat in the liver cells. So this point is very important because nowadays we are hearing it's all over that excess fructose is causing a fatty liver in a condition that is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is causing a lot of health problems for the majority of people, starting with the young to the old. So when you have a fatty liver, it means that your majority of your fat cells, majority of the liver cells have now been converted into storage of fat. And this may interfere with the functions of the liver. That's why there is a concern that the general population is consuming a lot of fructose through sugar, added sugars, and through the high fructose corn syrup, which is manufactured sweetener that is used in most beverages like cakes, like sugars found in soft drinks, juices, sodas, and in cakes, sweets. It has very high levels of fructose that are converted to fats in the liver. So that's a trending issue that we will mention later on. So this is what we are saying, that carbohydrates in the mouth, the digestion starts, mechanical digestion plus chemical digestion. And we are saying here in this picture, we can see that in the mouth, the enzyme salivary amylase begins break down starch into shorter polysaccharides. And then the chyme moves, or the food moves to the stomach. The salivary amylase is inactivated and no further carbohydrate digestion occurs because of the acidic nature of the stomach. And then the food now moves to the small intestines. The majority of starch digestion and breakdown of the saccharides occurs here. The enzyme pancreatic amylase breaks down starch into monosaccharides, disaccharides, and oligosaccharides. And then 4, the digestion of carbohydrates is completed by the enzymes attached to the brush border of the small intestines. That is the intestinal villi. Here, disaccharides and oligosaccharides are broken down into monosaccharide. And finally, the food will now move to the large. Whatever is not broken down and absorbed, that is the fiber, will move down to the large intestines. So fiber and other indigestible carbohydrates are partially broken down by the bacteria to form short-chain fatty acids and gases. The remaining fiber is excreted in the feces. So we continue to see how this happens. But before we continue, there are some factors that may affect the carbohydrate digestion and absorption. And these factors may include the glycemic index of the carbohydrates. Now, the reason why we are covering this at this stage is because we are still in digestion of carbohydrates, and we will see that the breakdown of carbohydrates and absorption of carbohydrates will end in the small intestines. Majority of carbohydrates are broken down in the small intestines and absorbed there. And there are some factors that may determine whether this happens and how it happens. So glycemic index is a scale that is used. It uses a numbering system from 0 to 100 to rank the carbohydrate-rich foods as high glycemic index, medium glycemic index, and low glycemic index, based on the rate that glucose-containing carbohydrates are digested and absorbed, and the rate they increase blood glucose levels. So if somebody asks you what is glycemic index, you will say it is the rate at which, after consuming a carbohydrate-containing food, the rate at which blood glucose levels rise. So the foods with a high glycemic index, they are very quickly digested, and they cause a larger increase in blood glucose level compared to those foods with a low glycemic index. Foods with a low glycemic index are digested more slowly and do not raise blood glucose as high or as quickly as the high glycemic index. Examples, and then there are factors that affect the carbohydrate absorption are described in the table below. Now, what I'm trying to say here, that the high glycemic index foods, which raise the blood glucose very, very rapidly after you consume the food, ones that we are calling high glycemic index foods, and they are the simple or easily digested foods. So those ones will be the simple sugars, while the low glycemic index foods are the ones that raise the blood glucose levels more slowly after consumption. And this follows that they are the complex carbohydrates. It will take the body more time to break down these complex carbohydrates, and therefore to raise the blood glucose levels, that is after absorption. Now, there are some factors that may interfere or that may affect the glycemic index of foods, and they are as follows. We just mentioned them because you may have the same food, but what you have done with it may determine its glycemic index. For example, cooking. Foods that are less cooked or less processed are digested more quickly, are digested more slowly, and have a lower glycemic index than foods that are more cooked or processed. And then there is an example there to give a picture of what we are trying to say. Now, pasta, which is a wheat product, when you cook it, you can cook it in many ways. If you cook it al dente, that is tender yet firm, it has a lower glycemic index than pasta cooked until it is very, very tender. So it's the same pasta, but the way you cook it will determine its glycemic index, the rate at which it raises the blood glucose after it's consumed. Fiber helps to slow down digestion of carbohydrate foods. High fiber foods tend to have a lower glycemic index than lower fiber foods. Examples here: high fiber foods such as whole grains, breads, oats, beans, and lentils have a lower glycemic index than low fiber foods such as white bread and rice cereals. So that's also a factor that you can know. Fat and protein. Fat or protein eaten along with the carbohydrates help to slow down digestion and reduces the glycemic index of carbohydrates. Examples: a snack that include carbohydrates with protein or fat has a lower glycemic index than a snack with carbohydrate only. For example, crackers or crisps with peanut butter have a lower glycemic index than crackers alone. And then another factor that may affect the GI: acids in foods. Acids in foods slow the time it takes for the stomach to empty after eating. Acids lower the glycemic index of carbohydrates. Now remember the way we said that in the stomach, the carbohydrate containing foods are mixed with the hydrochloric acid. And if you have added some acid to these foods, it will take the small intestine, that is a pancreatic juice produced by the pancreas and released into the small intestines. It will take a little bit more time for an alkaline environment to be formed. Therefore, the food will stay a little bit longer in the gastrointestinal system than if it did not have an acid. That is for carbohydrates. So addition of things like vinegar, lemon juice, or citrus juices of fruits to food will lower the gastrointestinal, will lower the glycemic index of these foods. So those are some factors that may affect the absorption of foods. Now, once absorption of the monosaccharide, that is now the glucose, because we saw when the monosaccharides are absorbed, they are all converted to glucose in one way or another, or stored to fat. So what we end up with carbohydrate digestion is the glucose, and this is what the liver releases to the blood. Now, how much glucose the liver releases to the blood is under hormonal control. And this happens this way. After eating a meal containing carbohydrates, the glucose level rises in the blood. After digesting the carbohydrate containing foods, the end product is glucose. Therefore, it goes without saying that immediately after eating, after digestion, and the glucose levels will rise in the blood. Now, insulin secreting cells in the pancreas sense the increase in the blood glucose and release the hormone insulin into the blood. Insulin sends a signal the body cells to remove glucose from the blood by transporting it into different organ cells around the body and using it to make energy. So this is what we are saying. After somebody consumes foods with carbohydrates, and the carbohydrates are broken down to the end product glucose, this glucose is then released by the liver to the rest of the body through the circulation, so that the circulation will lead this blood into organs and tissues and cells of the rest of the body for energy. So the pancreas senses through many signaling signals, and it releases a hormone called insulin. So this insulin increases in the blood, and the insulin helps the glucose to be moved from the blood into the cells so that the cells can metabolize, or that they can convert the glucose into energy. So insulin helps to reduce the blood glucose that is circulating in the blood by helping to move the glucose into the cells to be used in energy. Now, at the same time, when the glucose starts reducing in the blood because it has been moved into the cells, the muscle tissue and the liver that have already stored glucose in form of glycogen will be compelled to release more glucose into the blood so that it can continue providing energy. Now that's this point what it's saying, that in the case of muscle tissue and the liver, insulin sends the biological message to store glucose away as glycogen. As glucose is transported into the cells around the body, the blood glucose level decreases. So the work of insulin here we can see is to do two things. One, actually three, it is to move the glucose from the blood into the cells to be used as energy. Two, it tells the liver and the muscles to store glucose, to convert glucose into glycogen and store it to be used later. And in case there is excess glucose, insulin will also tell the body to store it in the form of fat. So those are the three effects that occur. Now the enzyme, the hormone insulin that we have said is produced by the pancreas. When the pancreas senses that there is blood glucose in the sugar, it has another opposing hormone called glucagon. Glucagon secreting cells in the pancreas sense the drop in glucose, and in response, glucagon is released in the blood, and glucagon communicates to the cells in the body to stop using all the glucose. So after the insulin has done its work of removing the glucose and putting it to the cells to be stored or used as energy, the drop in glucose in the blood is sensed by the pancreas, and the pancreas then will stop the release of insulin, but instead will produce glucagon, and this glucagon will now start producing, or will start sending signals to the liver and muscles to start releasing some of the glucose that had been formed as glycogen. So we are saying here that more specifically, it signals the liver to break down glycogen and release the stored glucose into the blood, so that glucose level stays within the target range and all the cells get the needed fuel to function properly. So glucagon and insulin are two hormones that are secreted by the pancreas. When the pancreas senses increase in sugar, it will produce insulin. Insulin will cause the body to use the glucose and to store the glucose. While the pancreas senses the decrease of glucose, it will stop producing the insulin and instead secrete glucagon, which will now start causing the release or the breakdown of glycogen that had glucose stored in the liver and in the muscles can be broken down to release more of the glucose so that it can maintain the blood glucose levels that are needed. Now, the process in which glycogen is broken is called glycogenolysis, as we can see there in the last statement. So this is what we have been saying with that, a bit to explain concept, that after a meal, blood glucose levels immediately increase. Insulin is released from the pancreas, stimulating the uptake and storage of glucose. So this is what we are saying, increased blood glucose. The pancreas produces insulin. Insulin causes the storage of glucose into glycogen in the muscle. It also causes glucose to be stored in the liver as glycogen. And in case there is excess glucose, the rest will be stored into fat storing cells. That is why people get fat. Even if you do not consume fat, you get fat cells from overconsumption of carbohydrates. On the other side, several hours after a meal, the blood glucose level drops. Glucagon is released from the pancreas. It stimulates both the breakdown of glycogen into glucose and the synthesis of new glucose. So there is from now down here, we can say decreased blood glucose causes the pancreas to release glucagon. Glucagon causes the liver to break down glycogen into glucose. And in case more sugar is required, more than the glycogen can provide, glucagon will cause the synthesis of glucose from other macronutrients. That is how we will see that glucagon will cause the breakdown of, or the synthesis of glucose from other macronutrients such as protein and fats. And all these, both the actions of insulin and glucagon will all lead to the normal range of blood glucose, because we need to maintain a certain level of glucose to make sure that the body has enough and not less for the provision of energy. So that is what has happened after absorption. The glucose now has been used by the body to provide energy to the various cells. But what happens now? The remaining of the indigested carbohydrates, that is the fiber and other resistant starches, which have not been able to be broken down by the digestive systems, they move to the colon or the large intestines. So some of the remaining digestible carbohydrates are broken down by the enzymes that are released by the intestinal bacteria that is found in the large intestines. So in the colon or the large intestines, we have the gut bacteria that is naturally found there. And this bacteria will help break down some fibers for food. The bacteria breaks down these fibers to get food from these fibers. And in the process of breaking down some of the fibers, there's the short chain fatty acids that are released and some gases. So these short chain fatty acids, we will know what are these when we are doing with fat, but they are low molecular fatty acids. They are small fats, easily digestible, easily broken down fats that are released from fibers when the bacteria breaks down the fibers, are either used by that bacteria to make energy and grow, or some of it is eliminated as feces, and some of the short chain fatty acids are absorbed into the cells of the colon, and the colon cells use them to for its functions. So that is the importance of the fatty acids, the short chain fatty acids that are a byproduct of breakdown of fiber by the bacteria. Whatever else now remains, because we are saying some fibers, and we will see which fibers, because we have two categories of fiber. We have the water-soluble fiber and other fiber. So all the other fibers that have not been broken down and all the other products of the breakdown are now excreted. And these fibers and other wastes from other nutrients that have not been excreted, that have not been digested, are accumulated in the colon, and they are then excreted through the anus. So the next thing we can now look at is the sources of dietary carbohydrates. And we can see that most carbohydrates are found actually from plant-based foods. And we said the carbohydrates that we get from foods are sugars, starches, and fibers. And these come from seeds. Examples of seeds are grains such as rice, corn, wheat, millet, those are seeds, chia seeds, all those. Roots, we have yams, cassavas, sweet potatoes, those root tubers and roots, carrots, all that. Fruits, stems, leaves, honey, dairy products. Those are some of them. There is a picture here showing a variety of them. And I'm sure there are various carbohydrates that are found in many foods in whatever countries we come from. Now, we said we'll mention more about dietary fiber, that when we consume carbohydrates, the carbohydrates that we get are the sugars, the starch, and the fibers. We are saying that fibers cannot be broken down by the enzymes, but they can only be shortened or broken down by the mechanical digestion, that is by chewing and such like activities. So these fibers are usually found in the indigestible parts of cereals, of fruits and vegetables, and they fall into two categories. Insoluble fibers, these ones do not absorb or dissolve in water. Examples, bran. And we find bran in so many seeds and legumes: wheat bran, corn bran, rice bran, the skins of fruits and vegetables. You can imagine those hard skins of fruits and vegetables and the bran of seeds. And then we have soluble fiber. This one dissolves in or absorbs water and can be metabolized by the good bacteria in the gut. Remember, we said in the colon that bacteria will ferment or will digest some fibers. So the fibers that are broken down by bacteria in the large intestines are the soluble fibers, not the insoluble fibers. So examples of fibers are those found in beans. I'm not talking about the covering of beans, but I'm talking about fibers that are found inside the beans, inside the apples, inside the carrot, in citrus fruits, in oats, fibers that are soluble. Now, it's recommended that for the health of people that males consume about 38 grams of fiber every day, and females consume about 25 of fiber every day. Those are the general recommendations, but it's important to have dietary fibers for the day because of these reasons. One, better gut health. The fiber found in foods feed the good bacteria. Remember, we said that the bacteria break down these fibers and they get some small nutrients there, including the short chain fatty acids. And when you have good bacteria, they help you fight the bad bacteria. Actually, they will destroy bad bacteria that may be found in your colon, therefore giving your colon the health it requires. Remember, even the colon cells, which we have said may utilize the short chain fatty acids that are produced when bacteria digest the soluble fiber. So it also provides some nutrients for those colon cells. So we say that dietary fiber is a prebiotic, meaning that it provides food for the good bacteria. In future, you'll come across two terms: prebiotic, the term here is one that is the food for the bacteria, and probiotic is the good bacteria that is found in our gut. So those terms should not be confused. It helps in weight management, and some types of fiber, you're being told, can cause weight loss by increasing the feelings of fullness. When you eat something fibrous, it makes you full for a long time because of the bulk, because it takes time to digest the food, and therefore it leads you to consume less food, and this will help you in your weight management. It reduces the diabetes risk. You know, later on when we are doing diet therapy or nutrition management in diseases, we are going to see what is diabetes. And we know diabetes is one of the leading cause of death as a disease, as a metabolic syndrome, whereby a person has elevated blood glucose levels. So when you consume a food with dietary fiber, especially the soluble type of fiber, which we are calling viscous fiber, it helps to lower the glycemic index of foods consumed. Remember, a low glycemic index causes the blood glucose to rise more slowly once you consume food than when the food has a high glycemic index. Then it also has protection against heart disease. How? Dietary fiber reduces absorption of total cholesterol and low density lipoprotein. In short, we are saying it reduces the absorption of fats, because fats bind to the dietary fiber when you are digesting food fats have a way of binding to this dietary fiber, and it is eliminated along with the feces. Overall, reducing the absorptions of fats that one could have absorbed if the fiber was not there. And this is good because excessive absorption of fat or consumption of fat has been known or has been linked to heart disease. And then it helps to prevent or relieve constipation. You know, when the fiber is mixing up with the food and the chyme there in the digestive process, it creates bulk. It makes them, the soluble fiber will make the waste absorb a little bit water, and this will help in the excretion of the wastes. If fiber is not there, there is no bulk, and the waste is very, very hard and small, therefore difficult in passing. Therefore, that's why fiber is important, because it makes the waste a little bit bulky and also a bit soft, and this can easily be released. Therefore, constipation is relieved. So, after doing all those things about carbohydrates, now we want to know what are the functions of carbohydrates. We said all macronutrients, which are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, they produce energy. So the first function is the production of energy for the various bodily functions that we have. And energy value of carbohydrates is 4 kilocalorie per gram. Now, before I talk about the 4 kilocalorie per gram, we need to understand that a kilocalorie, which is the same as calorie when we are talking about nutrition and food, it is a unit of energy. It is a unit by which we measure energy. And this energy is the energy that people get from food and the drinks that they consume. And it is the energy that they use for physical activity. So we measure that energy using the calorie. I'm sure most of you have heard that you are consuming high calorie food, meaning that food with a lot of energy, that you are using a lot of calories to do an activity, meaning that you are using a lot of energy to do something. So that's a unit. So macronutrients they give us energy, and they give us different levels of energy. For carbohydrates here, which we are dealing with as our topic today, we get 4 kilocalorie per gram. Now, this is to mean, and I really want us to be sure of what we mean here. We are talking about carbohydrates. We are not talking about foods. I'll pick on bread, for example. Assuming that all of us understand bread, we cannot say that 4 grams of bread will give us 4 calories. No, we are talking about the carbohydrate found in the bread, isolated from the bread. If we break down bread, there will be fiber, there will be fats, there will be other materials there. So that carbohydrate that we get from food is the one that we are talking about. We are not talking about the food itself. These are common mistakes that people make in dietetics. When you are told that somebody has consumed 100 grams of rice, and then you ask how many calories does that have, and then some people will assume automatically that 100 grams of rice has 4 times 100, 400. No. We have to do some tests. In food chemistry, in food science, we do some tests and determine the caloric value of foods, whereby we give that caloric value in terms of the common way that we do it is that we do it per 100 grams of a certain food, whereby we will see that 100 grams of rice has a number of calories. And then we can also see that 100 grams of potatoes has certain. You can get that information anytime in the internet. If you just type how many calories are in 100 grams of a certain food, you can be able to compare the caloric value of foods. So that's something that we needed to clarify. So carbohydrates also help to store energy. Remember, when we store energy in the body, we store it in form of glycogen. And glycogen is a type of polysaccharide. When we are talking about polysaccharide, we said these are sugars that have more than 10 glucose molecules. So that is why glycogen, which is a polysaccharide, is very important as energy storage in the body. Carbohydrates help us spare the proteins and fats for energy. Now, the carbohydrates are the most easily, it's the form of carbohydrates energy that the body prefers because it's easier to metabolize or to convert carbohydrate into energy than to convert other macronutrients, including the fats and the proteins. That does not mean that you cannot get energy from the other nutrients. You can, but it's just easier for the body to get the carbohydrates. And that's very important when it comes to other specific units that people do, whereby we see now some people are turning to train their body to use more fats than carbohydrates and becoming more fit. We'll mention later. So when you do not consume enough carbohydrates in your diet, the body can always convert other macronutrients into glucose. And this will cause the protein or the fats, especially the essential fats, not to do the work that they are supposed to do, other functions that are important, but instead to provide energy. So you must consume enough carbohydrates to make sure that the body uses other macronutrients for the purposes that they are, other purposes that they are meant to. Without carbohydrates, you cannot metabolize fats or lipids well. So you require carbohydrates to ensure the breakdown of fatty acids is going on well and to provide to prevent ketosis. Now, when we are doing fatty acid metabolism, we will see that the body converts, for the body to use energy from fatty acids, it converts them to compounds called as ketone bodies. And then these ketone bodies are the ones that the body uses now to produce energy. And they have a very high energy level. We will talk about that when we are doing fats. But now the problem is that the ketone or the ketone bodies are acidic and they raise the acidity in the body, in the blood. So in order to avoid a lot of ketosis, that is the breakdown of fatty acids, we need to provide a little bit of carbohydrates, especially for people who are not healthy, people who are suffering diabetes or they have other metabolic problems, to prevent the body from becoming more acidic, which can ruin a lot of cells and organs and tissues in the body. And other function, biological recognition process, carbohydrates help in processes such as this, e.g., in DNA replication, in enzymatic reactions. You know, when we are saying this enzyme, another definition of enzyme is a biological catalyst, is substances that helps to speed up biochemical reactions that occur in the body. Those reactions require some energy, therefore carbohydrates provide that energy. Transmembrane transport process, when you transport stuff into the cells and out of the cells, that process may be aided by energy that is sourced from carbohydrates. And another one is building macromolecules. So some macromolecules, big molecules such as RNA and DNA, they are built with the assistance of some energy that comes from the carbohydrates. So those are some functions of carbohydrates. But the major function here is the production of energy and the sparing of other macronutrients. So how much carbohydrates is required in the body? And we have deficiency of carbohydrates. So you will look around, all the literature will give you some requirements where they say everybody should consume carbohydrates. They give some figures, but the current research is showing that there is no absolute dietary requirement for carbohydrates. We cannot say that for you to survive, you must take this amount of carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are not essential nutrients. Remember, when we were defining essential, we said essential nutrients are those that cannot be synthesized. They cannot be produced by the body from other substrates or from other nutrients. Now we know if you do not have enough carbohydrates in your diet, the body is going to produce glucose from other nutrients, such as proteins and fats. So you can survive without consumption of carbohydrates. So the thing of the past that we used to say, which was a little bit misleading, that you must have some carbohydrates in your diet, it's not necessarily true for healthy adults. But I would, in my opinion, I would say that it's necessary for the children. Remember, children have a very high energy requirements. This we will see when we start doing nutrient requirements in various age groups. You will see differences, small differences in the requirements of different nutrients in the various age groups because of the stage of life in which small children have a very high rate of growing, so they need a lot of energy, and they need energy that can easily be digested and absorbed, and that will come from carbohydrate. That is why if a child does not have enough carbohydrates, they may suffer some deficiency of protein energy malnutrition. But in adults who are healthy, you can survive very well without taking carbohydrates. All that said, there is no way you can consume food and miss carbohydrates. Even if you put yourself in a diet that you feel that you are not having carbohydrates, a diet of vegetables and probably proteins, there is always small levels of carbohydrates in all plant foods. So there is no way you can be able to have 0 calories from carbohydrates. So you always have small carbohydrates in the body. Now, some certain cells of the body have been known to require carbohydrates for their function, like the brain cells, the red blood cells. But this one you get, the body gives priority. Whatever carbohydrate you get from the diet will go to the brain cells and the red blood cells. And if the body does not get this, the body will synthesize glucose from other nutrients and provide these brain cells and red blood cells and others that require the carbohydrates. If it comes to the worst, the breakdown of amino acids, that is the proteins, which I don't want to go into right now because we have to study it to understand what are amino acids, and also the breakdown of fats into glycerol. These are the substances that we are saying will be used to provide glucose in case glucose is missing in the diet. Now, there is something that I want to mention here, that if there is a long-term carbohydrate inadequacy, it will result into increased lipid metabolism and the production of organic compounds called ketone to produce energy for the body. When the body constantly has high levels of blood sugars, the end point of food, sugar, and starch, to deal with, this leads to weight gain, poor metabolic health, and an increased risk of heart disease. Just to try and explain what I mean here, is that if for a very long time an individual, a healthy adult individual, does not consume enough carbohydrates, the body can always get those carbohydrates from other sources. And it has to do with hormonal control. If you do not consume carbohydrates that are adequate, the body will produce, or rather the pancreas will produce little insulin. When there is absence of insulin, the opposite hormone called glucagon is produced. And glucagon, we saw, it helps in the synthesis of energy from other macronutrients, that is fats and proteins. So in very simple terms, what I'm trying to say is that if you do not have carbohydrates, enough carbohydrates in the body will start learning how to use the fats or the lipids. And this is very important in today's sports nutrition and weight management. You will hear people are going into ketogenic diets. People are becoming fat adapted. It's a good thing if done very well, and it can also be dangerous for some types of people, because the argument is that people can use fats more for energy in their body than we use carbohydrates. And if you do that, it means that you can be able to use the fats stored in the body that are making us fat and unhealthy, and you can be more energetic. And this has been seen a lot in sports nutrition, whereby most of our athletes and other sports people are training their bodies to depend more on fats than carbohydrates, because fats provide more energy. A gram of fat will provide 9 kilocalories when compared to the gram of carbohydrates, which will produce 4. The trick here is to try to make the body use fat and not carbohydrates. Unfortunately, majority of us in the modern world have become carb adapted, carbohydrate dependent. And this trend is being changed by the fitness and health enthusiasts who feel that they need to make their body use the stored fat more. Now, on the other hand, if you have too much sugar, we have seen too much sugar, it provides a lot of problem, and one of them is diabetes, and the other one is that excess sugar is stored into fats, and these fats will cause a lot of problems. And most significant one is cardiovascular diseases and other conditions. So that's the end, and thank you for listening. And we welcome any questions or any areas that need to be verified. Eric?
Yes, Annette, and thank you for taking us through the slides and start giving us more knowledge about carbohydrates. And I think I can see one question on the Q&A, and I'd like us to do it. I also urge our participants to continue sending in the questions to the Q&A if possible. Let us leave the chat for any other comments, but let us use the Q&A to send in your questions.
Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations states that malnutrition and food insecurity have contributed to an increasing frequency of crisis events as well as vulnerability of many communities across the globe. Nearly half of the world's population suffers malnutrition, yet there is little official development assistance that goes to nutrition. Hence, there is a need for training more humanitarians to help them acquire right knowledge and understanding needed to administer good nutrition and diet to millions of people across the world. Undertaking a diploma in human nutrition and dietetics prepared by Humanitarian Global gives you in-depth knowledge and understanding of nutrition care process. In our first module, you get to learn and understand the nutrition care process, general body metabolism, nutrition epidemiology, assessment and surveillance. Secondly, components of nutrition. In the second module, our participants get to tackle topics including micro and macronutrients, nutrition in emergencies and non-communicable diseases. Thirdly, diet therapy and meal planning. In the third module, participants also get to learn about diet therapy, meal planning and food production for invalids and convalescents. Fourthly, environmental and public health. In the last module, the learner will get to learn more about environmental health, nutrition in public health, measures of morbidity and mortality and communicable diseases. Apply for this course today by visiting our website www.humanitarianglobal.com for more details.
Annette, we can go to the Q&A. I can see one question.
Okay.
As we wait for our participants to keep sending in the questions.
All right. Now the question that we have is fruits. From mother Zioka, fruits due to the fructose digested in the liver, will it have low glycemic index? Okay, she wants to know about fruits and the glycemic index. That's a good question. Now, the good thing about natural food products is that they are a combination of many things. In addition to the fructose that may be found in fruits, there are a lot of fibers. And from the factors that we saw that affect the glycemic index, any food with fiber will have a lower glycemic index. So fruits, we say the glycemic index falls under a scale of 0 to 100, and foods that have less than 55 have a low glycemic index. From 55 to 70, we have the medium glycemic index, and greater than 70, we have the glycemic index. So majority of fruits will be of medium glycemic index. They will not be of high glycemic index, despite the fact that they have high sugars in terms of fructose and other, even glucose. But because of the presence of fibers, the more fibrous are fruits, the lower the glycemic index. So I would rate them to be of medium glycemic index because of the presence of fiber.
Thank you for that, Annette. I can see another question still on the Q&A.
Okay, then. So we are saying, let me just answer the one from Abdulkadir Jama. Which method can use GI, glycemic index rating? From what I understand from the question is how foods are rated in the glycemic index. Now, because of the session, it was short, I was not able to include examples of glycemic index rating, but there are tables that exist with the various foods and their glycemic index rating. So all what you need is to get access to these tables and check for any food and the method and the glycemic index that they have, whether it is less than 55, between 55 to 70, and 70. These tables will tell you if the food is of medium, or low or high glycemic index tables, and the glycemic index. These tables are sourced from different places in textbooks written by individuals, especially the food science books will have this rating. So I hope that is true. Even the internet itself, if you Google, if you check glycemic index of food, they will bring you a table and you can have a guidance of which food have low or less or high glycemic index. Now, somebody is asking, what percentage of carbohydrate should you eat for an active lifestyle? That's a good question. And I'm going to go back to the presentation here. In our introduction, we recommended that depending on what you want, you can have any percentage, but the recommended one, I just want to show you what it is between 45 to 65. This is what I meant. In our third point here, we are saying, considering the amount of energy produced from each of the micronutrients, a person, now for a healthy lifestyle, the one we are talking about, should get roughly 45 to 65% of their daily calories, that is the daily energy that they get from food. They should get it in terms of carbohydrates, 10 to 35% from proteins, and 25 to 35 from lipids. All these combined should not exceed 100%. So whatever energy you are getting from these macronutrients for an active lifestyle of a very normal life, it could be anywhere between 45 to 65% of the energy to get from carbohydrates. I hope I have answered there. Somebody else is also asking a very good question. What role, that is Elias Hussein, what role does the fructose that found in canned factory foods play in human body? So that's a good question. Now, fructose has become of a very big concern in today's world because we are not talking about the normal fructose that is found in honey and fruits, the natural occurring fructose. Nowadays, we are talking about the processed fructose that the food scientists have processed. The majority of it is processed from what we call the corn syrup, the corn. Now, it's not the fructose that is the problem alone, is how it occurs in the ratio with other monosaccharides. Now, when we are talking about canned or factory food, the sweetener that is used is the high corn fructose syrup. Now, this high corn fructose syrup is actually sugar, sucrose, and we say the sugar is made up of two monosaccharides, which is glucose and fructose. In the normal table sugar that we use, the ratio of fructose and glucose in the sucrose, in the sweetener called sucrose, the sugar, is 50-50. But the one that is used in the factory, the fructose is more than the glucose. It's about 55% to 45% when it is in fructose or the high fructose corn syrup that is used in these processed foods. So we saw that the liver does not, how the liver metabolizes fructose. We said fructose is not metabolized in the rest of the body, but rather in the liver. And what the liver does is it converts fructose to glucose to use it as energy. The remaining fructose is converted into fat and stored as a fat in the liver. So the more the fructose a food has, the bigger the burden for the liver is. And the liver is going to convert into fat, and you end up having a fatty liver. And that's a condition that we call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which now will cause you or the person having this very high fructose to have a very fatty liver that will not function as the normal liver because the liver cells have been replaced by the fat cells. I hope that's an answer. Samira Ahmed is asking, what is the difference between micro and the macronutrients? That's a good question. We also covered it here, but just to tell you, the macronutrients, the ones with the macro means many. Micro means, macro means large, micro means small. Macronutrients are required by the body in large amounts, not small amounts, while micronutrients are required by the body in small amounts. And we saw macronutrients are these carbohydrates, fats, and lipids. And the micronutrients, which are required in little amounts, are the minerals and the vitamins. It's there in our slides. When we send you the slides, you will go through. Hope I have answered that. What is the relationship between, that's another question from Anonymous. What's the relationship between fruit containing sugar, fructose, especially the natural fruits, and the blood sugar? Will there be an increase in blood sugar if I consume more fruits, that is fructose rich food? That's also a good question. Now, the fructose that is contained in fruits and other foods like honey, that's naturally occurring, is together with other substances. It's together with the fibers, together with other carbohydrates, together with other components of the fruits. So in most cases, in very normal healthy people, adult people, the body can be able to digest and metabolize the fructose that is naturally occurring, as long as the person does not overconsume fruits. If you take so many oranges or whatever fructose containing fruit, you will end up having a lot of fructose. And we said majority of the fructose is metabolized by the liver. Body cells are not able, they do not metabolize fructose in the body cells, but in the liver. So that's why I'm saying the body, the liver, will get overwhelmed. And once it has metabolized some of this fructose, it will convert the rest into glucose. So fructose, in other words, that does not cause it does not cause an influence on insulin, because it is not circulated there in the blood. It does not have an effect in insulin, but it has another effect that if you consume excess, it is converted in the liver, and that is a concern. So that's why we say that consume just adequate, not more. So to answer you, that fructose does not have an effect on the insulin, but it has other effect where it is converted into fat cells, and fat cells are inflammatory. They can cause a lot of problems, even to the insulin receptors that are found in the body. Another question, I hope I have answered that question. Another question from Bashir Mohammed. He wants to ask how to explain the condition galactosemia. Now, if you ever see a word ending with emia, it means it's in the blood. So galactosemia is when we have elevated amounts of galactose in the blood, meaning that the body is not able to break down or to metabolize, to use galactose. Because galactose is converted by the liver into glucose. Some conditions, health conditions or genetic problems may cause the liver to be unable to convert galactose into glucose, and therefore galactose will now be found in the blood. Remember, body cells only use glucose, and if the galactose is there and it cannot be converted in glucose, it will remain in the blood and it will have elevated levels. That is what we call galactosemia. I hope we have answered Bashir. Please differentiate the following. Somebody is asking, differentiate the following: nutrition and nutrient, food and nutrient. Okay, nutrition is the science that we study about food and nutrients. In very short, that's what I'm saying. And so nutrition is that science in which we study all what happens to the food and the nutrients that are consumed by human beings, from the time they are consumed to the time excretion happens, all what that happens in between there in the body, that is a nutrition and is a science. Nutrient is when you eat food, when you eat bread, you get some nutrients in it. So nutrients are the compounds that are gotten from food that help the body to provide energy for growth and other vital processes. So just to give an example here to be clear what is a nutrient, if you consume meat, some of the nutrients that you get there from meat will be protein, and it will also have some minerals and other nutrients. If you consume sweet potato, you get some carbohydrates, you get some vitamins, those are the nutrients. Sweet potato is a food, the nutrients are the vitamins, the carbohydrates that you get. So food and nutrients, the difference is the same. Food is what you ingest, any substance that you ingest that can provide energy and provide for the body to thrive. Nutrient is what you get from food. Example of food they have just given, I've said you have bread, and the nutrient you get there is carbohydrate. I hope I've answered Muhammad. And then also I need to know, can honey increase the blood sugar and risk the person with diabetes? That is Bashir Muhammad. Yes, that's a good question. And the answer to the question is yes. In honey, we have also glucose plus fructose. So it's not just one type of sugar that is found in foods. We also have various monosaccharides. So if you consume a lot of honey, you will get both fructose and glucose, and the glucose there may elevate the blood glucose of individuals with diabetes. So that is a big misconception that some people have, that they think if you are diabetic, you can now consume honey and not sugar, because they think honey does not have sugar. The thing is that honey does have sugar in terms of fructose and glucose, and the glucose will cause problems of elevated blood glucose levels for people with diabetes. Joseph, that's our last question. What causes stomach disorders? I don't know really what the question means. Joseph, do you mean stomach disorders connected with carbohydrates, or just generally stomach disorders? Okay, I'm going to answer the question. What causes stomach disorders when a person consumes carbohydrates? Stomach discomforts when you consume carbohydrates may come from a variety of reasons. I'll give two. One, if you do not have specific enzyme to break down the type of carbohydrates that you have eaten. A good example is lactose intolerance that we have given there. If somebody drinks milk and they do not have adequate lactase, that is the enzyme that breaks down lactose in milk, the milk sugar, into glucose and galactose, they will have problems, because the lactose, the sugar, will go all to the way to the large intestines. And here, the bacteria is going to digest it, break it down. When you hear bacteria, it means it's going to ferment it. And in the process of fermenting the sugar in the large intestines, some gases and acids will be produced. These gases and acids will cause discomfort. So that is one. Now, if you are to consume, for example, if you come from some, I don't know, places where you, like in the Western world where they do not consume a lot of vegetables, unlike our African continent where vegetables are widely consumed, if you have these people, visitors, and you serve them a typical African diet full of cereals and vegetables, some of them may not be able to digest them fully, because they also lack the bacteria. They lack the bacteria cultures that can be able to break down some of these soluble fibers in their large intestines. So they may have discomfort such as bloating, where the soluble fiber absorbs a lot of water and the person feels so bloated, and it may cause some discomfort. So even if you even us, the normal people, if you consume so much vegetables, very, very many vegetables, more than we should, it could also cause some stomach discomfort, because the bacteria that is involved in breaking down this will produce so many byproducts of the breakdown through fermentation, which may cause a lot of problems. So that's why we are saying, if you start with consuming vegetables, consume them gradually. Start with a little until the body gets used, until you get enough gut bacteria to break them down. And also choose the types of vegetables that do not cause you many problems. So those are the questions that I can see. I can only thank you for the participation.
Thank you for that, Anut. I think at this time we can also allow them to ask a few questions. And for you to do that, you can raise your hand, and I will be able to give you a chance to unmute your microphone and ask a question. And I will start with Bashir Mohammed. Bashir Mohammed Mohamud, are you there with us? You may unmute your microphone. I can see your hand is up. Okay, at this time, we are giving you a chance to ask our facilitator, our moderator, the question. To do that, you can simply raise your hand, and I will give you an opportunity to unmute your microphone to ask any question that you may have for the session today. I can see a Noor Muhammad. You can unmute your microphone, Noor. Noor Muhammad, you can unmute your microphone.
Anchor chemical breaking down.
Sorry, can you kindly repeat the question?
Okay, I think I get the question. You would want to know why the stomach does not carry out chemical breakdown of carbohydrates. That's a question. Okay, as we said, carbohydrate digestion by chemical digestion, that is enzymes, does not take place in an acidic environment. The enzymes that break down carbohydrates take place in neutral and alkaline environments. So the reason why carbohydrates are not chemically digested, that is, they are not digested by enzymes in the stomach, is because of the acidic nature of the stomach. Because the stomach produces gastric juices, and the one component of the gastric juices is the hydrochloric acid. And this acid is very important for another set of enzymes that we'll look at next time when we look at the protein, for protein digestion. The stomach produces this acidic environment for enzymes that are supposed to work on protein. Welcome.
Thank you, Noor, and thank you, Annette. I can see Clicks Miller. Are you there with us?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you so much, and good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I thank the presenter so much for the presentation, and I have 2 questions, which I think she might be able to answer. The first question is this. We understand that hydrochloric acid, as the word acid, is acidic and corrosive. Now, food nutrients that are not digested in the stomach, how do they pass the stomach and they still remain potent? I mean, knowing that they will pass through, they must have an encounter with the hydrochloric acid and no damage is being caused to it till it gets to the stomach. That's my question. I also have this worry too with drugs. When we take drugs and they react with the hydrochloric acid one way or the other, don't they get damaged or so? That's my first question.
Okay, can I answer the question first before you proceed?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much for the question. It's a very good question. So from what I've gathered, you want to know how come the other foods that are not broken down by acids, how do they escape the damage of the acid, the hydrochloric acid? Now it is very true. It's very true that hydrochloric acid is very acidic. But once it is produced in the stomach, it's supposed to create an environment for some set of enzymes. Now, what happens for hydrochloric acid in the stomach, once it is produced before food is consumed, it is quite acidic. But once the food gets there, once the chyme comes from the stomach through the esophagus and gets into the stomach, this HCl, the acidic nature, the pH is raised. So when there is no food, when the acid is produced, it may have a pH of around 1 to 3. But by the time food is introduced there, because the food has other alkaline stuff, the acid is lowered considerably to about 6, a pH of 6. So that changes the pH. And this pH now cannot destroy nutrients that can otherwise be destroyed by the acid nature. So that is what I would say, that it may sound as if the acidic value of the stomach is high, but once the food is introduced, the general foods that are introduced there, it lowers the acidity of the stomach. And by the time the food is fully there in the stomach being mixed with the gastric secretions, now the pH rises, and by the time it's leaving, it's about a pH of 6. Is that satisfactory?
Yes, it sounds very convincing. Thank you. And the second question is this. We understand that just a layman's understanding, which are also part of that somebody who is big, healthy, and huge should consume more food than somebody who is slim or light-weighted. Now, I've seen a situation where we have somebody who weighs up to 140 kilograms. We can imagine how big and huge that person is, but the person eats just once a day, and the person is okay, has no problems with gastritis, as they say it, and the person is very healthy. Let me put it that way. Even the person has done a lot of medical tests, and everything shows very well, and the person is comfortable eating once a day. And the once is not much, very little. Drinks water, takes fruits, eats just at around 4 p.m. in the day. And on the other hand, we have a certain guy who is very skinny and weighing about 49 kilograms. And he eats more than 4 or 5 times and in very huge quantities, but there's no change. I mean, he keeps looking like that, but he eats so much. And the other person who eats just once, who is wearing 140 kilograms, even at that, is not cutting down. Their weight has been maintained at that for a very long time. It just looks smarter. So I wish to find out from you, is there a correlation between size and the amount of nutrients that needs to nourish the body cells? Thank you.
Thank you too. That's a wonderful question. Now, this is my opinion, which could back up by science. Now, the first fact is in normal people, the bigger the person, the more the nutrients they require. You know, you just compare, is like if you have a small car and a big trailer, you require more fuel to move the big trailer than the small car. It's the same aspect. But now there are other factors that come into play for people and the consumption of foods, especially carbohydrate, macronutrients. Let's say macronutrients, and this is hormones. So the other factors, hormones. It sounds like that guy that you're talking about, the one with the 140 kgs who just eats like once per day, but continues to maintain that weight or even increase the weight. It sounds like he has some hormonal problem, probably a thyroid problem. You know, we have the thyroid hormones, which also assist or help. They play a big role in metabolism of nutrients. If we do not metabolize nutrients, that is, if the nutrients are not used for energy, they will be stored as fat. So this class of thyroid hormones, among others, I'm just giving an example, will make a person either utilize a lot of macronutrients for energy, produce a lot of energy, they are very energetic, or they will make a person store those nutrients. That's why we have conditions that are known as hypothyroidism and hypothyroidism. Hyperthyroidism means a person is releasing a lot of these thyroid hormones, and the thyroid hormones make a person utilize the energy nutrients more to produce energy. So if you take carbohydrates, it will make you convert these carbohydrates into energy and not to store them. On the other hand, we have a condition, other people may have a condition like this guy of 140 kgs may have a condition that is called hypothyroidism, meaning that he produces less of the thyroid hormones. And if he does not have these hormones that make the body utilize the nutrients as energy, then it means the nutrients will be converted into fat. So this could be due to a genetical predisposition or through a metabolic disorder. So the two people there may be suffering from either hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism. And I've said the 49 kilograms, giving an instance, will be having hyperthyroidism, producing so many thyroid hormones that make sure that all the nutrients, all the carbohydrates that he consumes are converted into energy, leaving none for storage, while the 140 who has hypothyroidism may resort to having less thyroid hormones that result to him not utilizing all the nutrients, but rather storing them into fat. So that could be a hormonal problem in my opinion. So the people, and I've said these the hormones, either it could be a genetic thing. Some people are born like that. If you look at the dad and the grandfather, they are supposed to be having less production of the thyroid hormones, while this other person, if you look at the family, probably they are like that. So that's the explanation that I would give to that question, to give you an idea why always it does not result that if you eat more, you gain more, and if you eat less, you gain less. Some people eat less and still gain. Some people eat more and they will never gain because of the hormones. Okay, is that an answer that you can work with?
Yes, very logical, very logical. Thanks so much.
Yeah, please read more about the thyroid hormones.
Okay.
It will give you a clear explanation.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Miller. I can see Adam A. Adam. Adam, are you there with us? You may unmute your microphone. Adam A. Adam, you may unmute your microphone.
Which one is the most important micronutrient that body require?
Kindly repeat the question.
Yeah, I've got the question. Thank you. He has asked, if I got it right, which is the most important macronutrient that the body requires? Is that the question? Now, if we are talking about macronutrients that are required by the body, mostly, I would say all of them are important. But the good thing is that the thing to note is that the body must have some proteins. Some proteins are essential proteins. I'm saying some proteins, if not provided by the diet, will not be produced in the body. So that when it comes to dietary intake, make sure that you have high biological value proteins, meaning that they have all the essential amino acids that are required in the body. So proteins are very important because some of them, the building blocks, are not found in the diet, in the body. They have to be produced. They have to be eaten in the diet. The same with the fats. You can do without some fats, but some fatty acids, some types of components of fats are called essential fatty acids because of the same reason. The body cannot synthesize them. So if you do not take them from the diet, you will suffer a deficiency. So in my opinion, you must consume essential proteins, you must consume essential fatty acids, but you would get away. I'm not saying you should not, but you ask what is the most important, so I'm giving you relatively. You can get away with not consuming carbohydrates because the body could produce carbohydrates from other macronutrients. All of that said, all the nutrients are important because they have their specific functions in the body. So that's just what I would say. Is that okay?
You may unmute your microphone.
Yes. Hello. Good morning.
Yes. Good afternoon from this side, Agustina.
Yes. My father time is late. Okay. So what I want to get to know is just a very small thing. In an enzyme, a part of a gastric acid, or they differ in the different system in taking place the digestion.
Pardon again, you want to know how enzymes functions, or what's the question? Please repeat.
Yes, my question is asking about, is an enzyme a part of gastric acid, or they differ in the metabolism system in taking place the digestion? Okay.
Thank you for the question. I get it clearly. You're asking if enzymes are a part of gastric juices, or they form another part of metabolism. Now, yes. Enzymes are help in breaking down nutrients, but various enzymes work in different environments in the gastrointestinal tract. For instance, when you come to the stomach wall, the cells of the stomach walls will produce gastric juice. The gastric juice that we are talking about is a combination of many substances, including mucus, including enzymes, including acids, and so many other. It's a juice that has many things. The reason why these things are produced together is the enzyme, if produced and it's not given a good environment in which it can work, it will not work. So a juice that is produced in the stomach will have hydrochloric acid. The purpose of hydrochloric acid for the enzyme will be to reduce the pH, to make the environment more acidic, because the enzymes that work in the stomach need this environment of the stomach to be acidic so that they can work well. So to make work easy for the digestive system, the gastric juice comes together, is produced together with the enzyme, because the acid works together with the enzyme. if it's not acidic enough, in some conditions, disease conditions where the stomach is not acidic enough because of absence of the hydrogen ions, the enzymes that break down protein, which only work very well in acidic environment, they may not work. So I hope that answers your question. And if I go further and give another example, the pancreatic juice, which is produced in the pancreas and released in the small intestines, comes in an alkaline juice. Now, this alkaline juice makes sure it provides an environment for the carbohydrate enzymes, the amylase and other enzymes that break down the carbohydrate. So that is what I would say. They are produced together, but they have different functions, but they do work together overall. Is the question answered?
Yes, thank you very much. This is what I want to know. It's clear to me. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for that. And due to time, I would like to invite Anthony to give us a closing remark.
So thank you so much, Annette, and also Eric for the wonderful session. Actually, it has been one of the longest sessions that we have had, but also very informative, educative. And as you always say, sometimes it's nearly all the times it's hard for us to exhaust all the questions. And that is why we have been able to come up with a forum that I would urge you to be part of it. So that even if you had a question today and we were unable to handle it because of time, you can go there and be able to register, to post it there, and then our facilitators, they're going to get back to you with a response. So we've been sharing a link with you, and I just wanted to show you how the platform looks like and how it does work. So through the link that we shared, and the same link, you can get it from our website. So that means if you go to the website, you can try and locate this tab for Humanitarian Global Community. So once you click on that tab, you're going to be redirected here. So make sure that you can sign up. It's a very easy process for you. Sign up. And then once you sign up, we have been able to create very many forums. And you can even try to locate the one for food security and nutrition. Nutrition and food security. So this is where we post topics in regard to food security and nutrition, and also human nutrition and dietetics. So like yesterday, we were able to post a question which was in connection to today's topic. So that was trying to basically ask you about the classification of the nutrients, and that is what we were tackling today, focusing on the macronutrients, mostly the carbohydrates. So that means this is a very good forum. Go there, reply to this topic. If you have a question, make sure that you can click on that button and then reply with your question. So once you've done that, we are going to respond to you, and then you can get the information. So here you're going to make friends, you're going to meet other participants from different countries. And I know some of us have been able to join. So if you have not managed to join, ensure that you can join. So from Humanitarian Global, would like to say a big thank you to you, all of you, for making time close to 3 hours. And thank you so much for your patience, and also for following up with our session. And in case if you are interested in pursuing further training in these areas, we do have very many courses in these areas, and you can reach out to our team. So we've been sharing the contact details with you on the chat section. So always feel free to write to us, and then we're going to reach out to you. So that is it for today, and thank you so much. And in case of any other inquiries, feel free to reach out to us via the contact details that we gave you. So thank you so much, and bye-bye for now.
Nutrition and dietetics are among the major tools for development of health and basic needs of human beings in developing countries. According to WHO, health is not only denoted as the absence of disease but a state of complete physical and mental well-being in relation to the productivity and performance of an individual. Thus, we should always aim at ensuring that every community is in good health and great nutritional status. To aid in this process, taking a postgraduate diploma professional course in human nutrition and dietetics prepared by Humanitarian Global will equip professionals with expert-level skills in this thematic area. Among the key modules and topics covered include nutrition care process. In this module, the participant will get to learn more about nutrition care process, micronutrients and macronutrients, as well as nutrition assessment and surveillance. Secondly, planning nutrition interventions. In the second module, the participant will get develop more knowledge on planning a nutrition intervention, emergency nutrition interventions, and how to monitor and evaluate programs in nutrition emergencies. Thirdly, parenteral nutrition. This module will cover various topics areas such as parenteral nutrition, principles of human nutrition, feeding disorders and nutrition anthropology. The fourth module is nutrition counseling. This module will help the learner understand more about principles of nutrition counseling, nutrition and HIV/AIDS, nutrition information systems, communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases. Module 5 covers program design and research methods. In this module, the learner will get to develop more knowledge and skills on program design, research methods, and how to foster community partnership in program planning and evaluation. Additionally, the learner will be trained on entrepreneurship in nutrition and dietetics. Our sixth module is food safety. The module offers more understanding on food safety and hygiene, health behavior change, nutrition epidemiology and food safety legislation. Module 7 covers clinical dietetics. In this module, learner develop in-depth knowledge in clinical dietetics, nutrition biochemistry and food microbiology. Module 8, which is nutrition in the lifespan. It provides the learner with more knowledge and skills on topics such as nutrition in the lifespan, nutrition and sports, nutrition education and geriatric nutrition. Apply for this course today by visiting our website www.humanitarianglobal.com for more details.